the Democratic side who's been really strong in pushing this. Please welcome a guy with his own border with Canada, New Yorker, Chuck Schumer.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim. And first, let me thank Tim and his co-sponsors, Amy and Mark. Tim has done an amazing job here. He has been persistent. He has been focused. He knew how important this was even a month or two ago before we saw the menace of all these tariffs. So Tim deserves a lot of credit from Virginians and from Americans for getting this issue to the point where we now will have a vote on it. And the Republicans are squirming because they know very simply that tariffs are simply a tax increase. Let's listen to one of them, Senator Mullen. He said tariffs is a tax and it will be passed on to consumers. Rand Paul said tariffs are simply a tax. And here's the most galling thing. President Trump says, quote, "I couldn't care less if prices go up to American families." America, you hear that? Donald Trump says he couldn't care less if you pay more. And it's not just a little. The estimates go as high as $6,500 more for the average American family. To the family that's sitting down Friday night and trying to figure out, do they have enough money to go on that vacation or to visit grandma or maybe to buy a car? Take away $6,500 and those dreams are out the window. And Trump couldn't care less? Give me a break. Give me a break. And so many jobs will be lost. In New York alone, we estimate that over 200,000 jobs could be lost. We have the Canadian border. In a city called Plattsburgh, on the northern border in Clinton County, 20% of the companies are Canadian-owned or Canadian-affiliated. Plattsburgh will just go into deep recession if this happens. So we're not going to we're going to do everything we can to fight. And oh, the most galling thing of all, why is he doing this? As Tim outlined, it's not fentanyl. You know, they always make up an excuse because they have no justification for what they're really doing. In this case, they say fentanyl, but the amount of fentanyl that comes over the Canadian border is minuscule. They're doing it so they raise revenue so they can give tax cuts to the billionaires like everything else. The whole government is geared, whether it's Social Security or Medicaid or Medicare or housing or agriculture, the whole government is geared to create dollars that can give tax breaks to the billionaires. And one final thing. Yes, are there certain areas where tariffs might be needed? Yes, it should be pinpointed in specific areas. But typical of this administration, they use a blunderbuss instead of a scalpel. They use a hatchet instead of a scalpel.
Chainsaw.
They use a chainsaw instead of a scalpel. Thank you, Tim. And they just go after everything with huge destruction for the American people. You know, I've been a China hawk, and the kind of sort of imposing broad tariffs on China, which really has hurt us in trade every step of the way, makes sense. To do that to Canada, our friend, who our economies, our interrelated economies depend on each other, makes no sense whatsoever. But this administration makes no sense when it comes to tariffs. One final point. I've talked to New York business people. They hate uncertainty. Whether you're a small business person, a middle-sized business person, or a big business person. And the tariffs are so uncertain, so chaotic, such a mess, that business people are pulling back. So are consumers. They're saying, I don't know what's going to happen. I better not spend on that extra plant or hiring that, training that extra worker. So this is just a nightmare for the American economy, a nightmare for the American worker, a nightmare for American businesses. We're going to fight it every step of the way. Thank you, Jim.
And now my